The next presenter, I would like to invite Mr. Jorgen Gemihard. To tell you about him, Mr. Jorgen is a physics graduate from Wurzburg and Glasgow. Started his career in 1999 as a research assistant at FOGRA. He became the head of printing technology department in 2004, where he oversees research projects on offset and digital printing. Jorgen is an active in national and international standardization efforts, managing a global certification program aligned with the process standard offset ISO 12647. His role extends to delivering presentations at industry events, training sessions, and symposiums. Please welcome Mr. Jorgen.
Hello to everybody. I'm really glad to be here, and also thanks for the invitation of FOGRA. What I'm trying to tell you today is how you can improve your offset business with the help of research and standards. What FOGRA, my employee, is, that's why I want to start my presentation with a short introduction of FOGRA. Later, I will explain you how the research we were doing and also other institutes are doing helped to build a standardization concept for offset printing. Then I want to introduce you the actual concept of the standardization for offset printing before I explain you the benefits of it. And at the end, I want to shortly tell you that it is also possible for print shops to get certified according to this standard and how such a certification can, how you can benefit from such certifications. So I will start about FOGRA. FOGRA is an association with approximately 900 members, and our members are print shops, suppliers, manufacturers, agencies, and also consultants. All those companies which contribute to the production process of printing products. Approximately half of our members are located in Germany, and the other half are international companies in over 50 countries. FOGRA has been invented in the year 1951 already, and since then we are a research organization. We have three main tasks, which are research, and this can be public funded research or contract research for individual companies. Then we make testings in our several laboratory with cutting-edge equipment. And the last of these three tasks are certifications according to standards. We have 4 departments, and 3 of them mirror the production chain of printing products. These are the prepress technology department, the printing techniques department, where I come from, and the department security applications. A 4th department of FOGRA, which is materials and environment, cannot be allocated to a certain production step of print production. This department more or less supports the other departments with chemical analysis and their laboratory equipment. And the research results which were gained in all of these 4 departments are finally transferred through our various training courses, symposia, and standardization work. The research we do is not arbitrary. We rather discuss the topics we are doing research on with our so-called technical committees, and we have 6 of them for different topics, and these technical committees are built of delegates from our member association. So with each technical committee, we meet twice a year in order to discuss problems of the printing industry and think about how we can generate research in order to solve these problems. So at the end, we try with our research to find practical solutions. The research we do mostly has to do with print media standards, directly or indirectly. And I just want to give you a few examples about this. For example, there's the standard series 15930, which defines the PDFX format, or the ISO 12647.7 and 8, which defines how to make a contract proof or validation print. Then there's the ISO 3664, which describes the right viewing conditions for printing products. Or there are also standards for the printing process itself. For example, for digital printing, there's the ISO 15311.1 or 2, which describes the print quality in digital printing, or the ISO 12647.2, which describes how to do process control in offset printing. And this ISO 12647.2 is the main topic of my today's presentation. I just want to mention another standard. It's a standard series. It's the ISO 18621, which defines metrics for objectively characterizing print quality. And the findings of our research project contributed to all of these standards to be improved, or the one or the other standard was created completely newly with the findings of our research projects. In order to bring the findings of our research projects to standardization, we actively participate in international standardization boards. And maybe the most important of them is the TC 130, which consists of different working groups. And we participate, for example, in Working Group 2 for prepress data exchange, Working Group 3 for process control and related metrology, for material, media and materials, or Working Group 11 for environmental impact, or Working Group 12 for prepress. And out of those, I want to highlight the Working Group 3, where my colleague even is convener, and this working group is responsible for developing the ISO 12647.2, which I already said is important for offset printing. There are also some other working groups where we are active, but I don't want to go into more details here. So now I want to explain how the research contributed to the foundation of a standard for offset printing. Before I do so, we should make clear what a standard is, or what a standard should be, or what a standard should not be. I think it's clear that a standard must not be arbitrary. A standard rather must reflect the state of the art. A standard must be developed from practical experience, and a standard must be scientifically sound. And the latter can be guaranteed with research which builds a reliable basis for such a standard. The research for offset printing began in the 70s or 80s years, where projects have been done in order to find out which parameters influence the printed colors. And it was found out that the materials can influence the colors as well as the process parameters. On the material side, these are the inks and the papers, and the relevant process parameters which were identified at this time were the solid tone density, the tone value increases, and the color sequence. The color sequence is an important parameter because the second ink, which is printed on top of a first ink, doesn't have the same thickness. Like you see here, the second ink has a lower thickness than the first ink, and thus making a difference if you print magenta on cyan or if you print cyan on magenta. It furthermore was found that the important process parameters, solid tone density and TVIs, are influenced by the paper. And the most important influence, or the most important paper feature here, is the surface, especially if the paper is coated or not coated. I guess all of you, or at least most of you, know that on coated papers you can achieve higher solid tone densities than on uncoated papers. And that on uncoated papers the TVIs are higher than on coated papers. And based on these early findings, a first version of a standard for offset printing was generated. And this standard classified two paper types. One paper type for coated papers and one for uncoated papers. And depending on the paper types, it furthermore specified specific aim values and tolerances for the solid tone density and the tone value increases. And last but not least, a unique color sequence was specified. Then later in the 80s, or late 80s or beginning 90s, color measurements for printing products was invented. And this color measurements was very important because it was found out that measuring the solid tone density alone is not enough to characterize a solid tone. And this can be seen in the example here, which is called the blue mystery. What you see here are three solid tones which have been printed with three different inks. And the number 1 and 2 have the same density but different color. And the numbers 2 and 3, let's say, almost have the same color but different density. So, based on this knowledge, the following versions of the process standard offset or the standardization implemented the color measurement instead of solid tone density measurements. And this was only possible through the development of color measurement. Measuring density nowadays can still be useful, but only for process control, not for conformance checks. And when I mean process control, then I mean if you, for example, have an aim value for the solid tone density, and during the print run you measure a density which is higher than the aim value, then you just have to lower the inking. And if the value you measured is too low, you have to increase the inking. Quite simple. Color measurements, after its invention, could also be used to specify the inks. And this was done in another standard, which is called the ISO 2846.1. This standard defines the color and the transparency of inks that can be used for offset printing. In terms of color, it defines LAB values for cyan, magenta, yellow, and black on a reference substrate. And these LAB values must be reached on a reference paper within a certain ink film thickness. And this is tested on a test printing device with varying ink film thicknesses. Then the color is measured on the produced samples. The delta E with reference to the aim values is calculated. And this delta E is then plotted like you see here on the left-hand side above the corresponding ink film thicknesses. This has been done here for 3 inks, and only those inks are in conformance with the standard, which have measuring points which lie inside this rectangle marked by the thick lines here. So in these examples, only the ink 1 would be conforming to the standard. The transparency also is an important feature of printing inks, especially when you do 4-color printing. Because if you would have opaque ink and you print an opaque ink about another ink, then only the light reflected by the uppermost layer would be reflected, and the light would never be seen by the inks which are lying under this opaque ink and not be seen by the paper. So for 4-color offset printing, the transparency is essential. And this is checked when you do prints on a black substrate. This has been done in these examples here, and the left example shows that the color of the black substrate doesn't change much when it is overprinted. And this is only the case when the ink is transparent. And the other example In the other example, you see that the color of the black substrate changes significantly after overprinting, and this is because the ink is opaque. This standard is not so important for the printers because the printers cannot check if the ink is complying to the standard. This is a standard which shall be applied by the ink manufacturer, and you as printer should ask the manufacturer to deliver inks which comply to the standard, and if you have such inks, then you can be sure that you are able to reach the solid tone colors on production paper. One problem for color measurements are the optical brightness agents, which are called OBA. Those OBA are used in printing papers in order to make them brighter and whiter. And OBAs absorb UV light on the one side and emit blue light on the other side. But this means that the color you are seeing depends on the UV content of the illumination. So if you look at the picture on the left-hand side, you see different paper samples which are illuminated with visible light without any UV content. And one would say, yes, those papers more or less look the same. But on the right-hand side, you see exactly the same papers which are illuminated with UV, and then suddenly you see they look completely different. And the three papers on the bottom row, in this case, have a lot of OBA because they shine very bluish, whereas the papers on the uppermost row have comparatively low OBA content. So the consequence is that for watching prints, it is essential to use standard light. And this standard light is defined in ISO 3664, and it was agreed upon to use the so-called D50 standard light in the whole printing industry. An increasing problem with OBAs occurred in the 2000s. Especially in the 2000s, more and more OBA were used for paper production. And the problem was that the papers were or had to be viewed under D50, but the measurement instruments measured those papers or the prints which have been produced on these papers with a bulb. And this measurement mode, by the way, is called M0. But a bulb has a comparatively low UVA content, and this means that the OBA effect was not captured correctly by those measurement devices. For this reason, a new measurement mode was introduced, which was called M1, and the M1 measurement mode means that the illumination has a UV content according to D50. And the motto behind this is measuring like seeing, which means if you watch under D50, then you also have to use D50 light for color measurements. Another milestone for the printing industry was the establishment of computer-to-plate systems. And as far as I know, Pragati, located here in Hyderabad, was the first user of CTP systems in India. And CTP has its triumph at the turn of the millennium. And instead of film-based plate making, a laser is used to set the halftone dots on the plate pixel by pixel. And a big advantage of these CTP systems is that you can apply tonal corrections in the RIP with the aid of correction tables. And they work quite simple. If you indicate that the tone values are too high, the RIP just skips single pixels from the halftone dot in order to make it smaller. And if you tell the RIP that your halftone dots are too small, that your tone value increases are too small, then the RIP just adds single pixels to the halftone dot. And there are two ways where you can apply tonal corrections in the RIP. The first is the linearization, and the second, the so-called process calibration. The linearization ensures that 50% tone value in the data set is 50% on the plate, and the process calibration assures that your desired tone value increases are achieved. And the desired tone value increases usually are the tone value increases which are found in the standardization concept. So with CTP and these correction methods, it was possible also to compensate the tone value increases for different ink behavior, because not only the paper is responsible for the TVIs, also the inks have a big impact on TVIs, which can be adjusted with a RIP. And all in all, with CTP, a higher precisions of the TVIs in print were possible. In the 19th, color management was invented. I see there's a typo, management. With the aim of color management, it was possible to make a colorimetric characterization of each device which is participating in the printing process. And this is done via characterization data or ICC profiles. And the ICC profiles can be used to convert data from one device to another device without changing the color. In daily practice, there are especially two use cases where profiles are used. The first is for the preparation of print data. This process usually starts with an RGB data which might have been captured by a digital camera and which has to be separated to printable CMYK. So in order to convert them, the individual profile of the camera is allocated as source profile, and the profile of the printing process is allocated as aim profile. And then these print CMYK data can also be converted for proofing. For this reason, the print profile is allocated as source profile and the individual profile of the proofer as aim profile. And when you then print those CMYK data with a proofing device, it would look the same as the result which you get from the offset production print. It usually is not possible for print shop to create its own output profile. I know some of the print shops are doing this, but you need a lot of expert knowledge, and creating profiles is also time consuming. So this is the reason why it usually cannot be done by print shops. But in order to support the print shops, FOGRA and also other institutions provide generic profiles for standard printing conditions for free. So you can use those profiles and use them without paying for this. And two prominent examples of characterization data and ICC profile are FOGRA 51, which is the characterization data, and the corresponding ICC profile is PSO coated V3, or the FOGRA 52 and the corresponding profile PSO uncoated V3. And how those profiles are generated, I briefly want to explain you. It begins with a collection of a representative choice of papers. These papers are then printed in different print shops, and afterwards all those color patches of the charts are measured, averaged, and smoothed. And at the end, a mathematical correction is applied in order to shift the corner values of the colors exactly on top of the desired standard. And from this process data, finally a profile is generated, but before it is launched, it undergoes a testing phase in order to assure that it is able to create a proof-to-print match with this profile. The research which has been done to develop a standardization concept is not only restricted to four-color printing. It also goes beyond four-color printing, and one example is the so-called extended color gamut printing. So you get an extended color gamut if you use more than 4 inks, more than just CMYK. And in many cases, this is done with a fixed set of 7 colors. So besides CMYK, also orange, green, and violet are printed. And with this extended color gamut, you can simulate certain spot colors which are inside of this color gamut. And this has a big advantage. The advantage is that you don't have to change the spot color from job to job. As soon as the spot colors are inside of this extended color gamut, you can stick to the fixed set of 7 colors. In order to support this, also tools have been generated. 2 of them are an exchange color space, which is called FOGRA 55, or a 7Z media wedge for proof control. A recent research project also made a proposal for a new 7Z offset printing standard. This is a twofold proposal. The first part is a proposal for an ink standard, which defines the color and the transparency for orange, green, and violet. And the second is a proposal for a printing process standard, which defines the solid tone colors of orange, green, and violet on production printing, which defines a color sequence and a screening algorithm. So now I want to explain you a little bit more what the standardization concept for offset printing says. At the beginning, I want to go through a very brief history about the development of the standard. The first standard for offset printing was developed by FOGRA and the German printing associations, which is called BVDM. And a first version of the so-called process standard offset was launched in 1981 already, followed by a gradual implementation in printing practice. Afterwards, other print shops who are not printing with offset printing got aware of this concept and also wanted to have something for their printing processes. So the concept for offset printing was transferred also to other printing technologies like newspaper printing, screen printing, and so on, with the concept kept constant, but with individual aim values and tolerances. At this point, the standardization only was a German project until the middle of the 80s, when international working groups were formed and led by FOGRA in order to develop the ISO 12647 series, at the beginning exactly according to the concept of the process standard offset. And afterwards, later, up to now, several revisions of the process and standard offset as well as the ISO standards occurred. And currently, there's a revision of the ISO 12647.2 at work, and I would expect that it will be launched in 1 or 2 years. About the ISO 12647, I already mentioned that this is not a single standard. It rather is a standard series comprising 9 parts. In the first part, you don't find any aim values and tolerances at all. Here you only find definition of parameters and measurement methods. For example, you would find there what is a tonal spread and how can I determine the tonal spread. Aim values and tolerances can be found in parts 2 to 6 for different printing technologies. Part 2, for example, deals with offset printing, in this case sheet-fed and heat-set offset printing. Part 3 with cold-set newspaper printing. Part 4 with rotogravure printing. Part 5 with screen printing. Part 6 with flexo printing. And then we have parts 7 and 8, which are completely different. You again won't find there any aim values, because these standard parts describe how to simulate one of the other printing conditions. So you find tolerances there, but you don't find aim values, because the aim values depend on the printing conditions you want to simulate. And the part 7 deals with the so-called contract proof, which is the most important of those two parts for the offset standardization concept. And part 8 deals with the so-called validation print, which is usually applied for toner-based digital printing machines. And the newest of these parts is the part 9, which deals with metal decoration printing. Then we have the process standard offset, which is often called PSO. And like you see here, this PSO is not just a few pages. This is a really thick and heavy book which explains the rule for print production. But not only print production or the production process is explained here. Here you find the whole production chain from prepress to print. It comprises sheet fed, heat set, and cold set, gives aim values and tolerances for all those processes. But beyond this, it also gives practical tips for daily business. So this means that this process standard offset or PSO is even a bit more than just the pure ISO 12647.2 standard. Unfortunately, this book is only available in German language. But there's also something called Media Standard Print, which again is available in English language. And this Media Standard Print gives compressed information for different printing technologies. Not only offset printings, you will also find other printing technologies here. And what you find here are clearly arranged tables with aim values and tolerances in print, with rules for contract proofing, with recommended ICC profile. And this is a PDF which can be downloaded for free from the webpage of the BVDM. All those three rules, ISO 12647.2, PSO, and Media Standard, tell you the same story. So they comply to each other. This is quite important to know. And what they tell you is the following. All of them define 8 printing conditions. And one printing condition consists of a certain print substrate, of a certain colorant description, and a certain TVI curve. For example, printing condition 2 is made up of print substrate 2, colorant description 2, and here TVI curve B. For the print substrate, the color and the surface are specified. And again, the major feature for the surface is if there's a coating or not. So the print substrate is determined, or the print substrate type is determined according to the color and the surface. Then we have the colorant description, which is nothing more than just solid tone colors for cyan, magenta, and black. So here you find aim values for those primaries and tolerances. And then we have a set of TVI curves defined, which you see here, which are numbered A, B, C, and so on. And you also find tables with concrete aim values and tolerances for concrete tonal steps. And common for all of those printing conditions is one single color sequence, which has to be adhered to, and this is first black, then cyan, then magenta, and then yellow. How is the standard applied? It first starts with a classification of the underlying substrate. So the color of the substrate has to be measured and the surface of the substrate has to be determined, and then you can say, I have a PS1 or a PS2 or a PS3. And depending on the paper type, the corresponding ICC profile can be chosen, and also corresponding to this paper type, the specific aim values for solid tone colors and TVIs. And at the prepress stage, the ICC profile can be used for prepare print data and to create a contract proof. The print shop only has to assure that it achieves the specific aim values and tolerances which are defined for this paper type. So he has to adjust the solid tone colors during the print run, and he has to adjust the TVIs, which is usually done in the CTP RIP. And for those two steps, you only need a spectrophotometer where you can measure the solid tone colors and the TVI. Nothing more is needed for the print shops. So the underlying standardization concepts has many advantages. For the printing process, for example, it is intuitive to use. And furthermore, it allows easy failure detection and failure correction. So you have tolerances for the solid tone colors and tolerances for the TVIs. If the solid tone colors are out of the tolerance range, then you have to adjust the inking on the printing machine. If the tone value increases are out of the tolerances, you might need to produce new plates with tone value correction tables in the CTP RIP. The advantages of the standardization concept for print quality is that you have a defined quality level. When you work according to the standard, the prints look the same always and everywhere. And maybe one of the biggest benefits is that the print results can be simulated prior to the print run. So with the help of color management, a contract proof can be created prior to the print run. And the client can have a look at the contract proof. And if the client doesn't like the result, at this stage, easy changes can be made because the printing process didn't start yet. And as soon as the client likes the proof, the data can be sent to the print shop and the client can be sure that he gets what he expected. So at the end, with applying the standardization concept, you will have happy customers. And about this, also many renowned big print buyers are aware. And I know, for example, from Siemens, which is a big German company, that they align its print quality worldwide with the PSO in order to avoid that the same data produces a different output in different printing locations or at different times. How does it look like in India? India has a booming printing industry, especially in the packaging sector, which we have already heard in the presentations before. And the reason for this is that the incomes of the middle class are increases, which lead to more consumption. But the requirements for printed products are high. High print quality is required and a high level of consistency. But unfortunately, what you find in many Indian print shops is that you have, for example, a lack of incoming goods inspection, for example, of the papers. But you have to know your paper in order to classify the paper type, which is the basis, the starting point for the certification, for the standardization. In Indian print shop, furthermore, there are many different practices due to differing cultural and industrial realities. And furthermore, many print shops rely on operator skills rather than standards. And this leads to varying print results. The consequences are that you have delay and that you produce a lot of wastage. And these points, again, lead to low company profits. And when you apply the standardization concept, you can reduce your production cost and therefore increase your profits. But where can you reduce your production costs? When you apply standards, you can achieve savings, and these savings are mainly achieved in the setting up phase of the printing machine. If you print without standard, this setting up process is more or less a trial and error process. But with a standard, with concrete aim values for the solid tone colors and for the tone value increase, you can make targeted adjustments of the printing machine, which finally lead to less iterations. And due to less iterations, you save time, you save electric power, and you save materials, which are papers, inks, and also plates. All of those things contribute, but maybe the biggest portion will be due to the paper. And just for the paper saving, I want to make an exemplary comparison, which you see on the right-hand side. So I exemplarily want to compare a production with a standard and a print production without standard. Both of them start with the sheet feed and the inking of the printing units. Then you maybe print, it's just an example, 100 sheets until you have your first color copy. Then you make a first setting of the colors on the printing machine. And then again, you might print approximately 100 sheets. And afterwards, you find out that you need to do a second ink setting and again print 100 sheets. When you print according to standard, at this point, you might have already come to a satisfactory okay print. And without standard, you might need a third setting of colors. So in this example, you would save 100 sheets for setting up the printing machine. And this is just an example. Depending on the complexity of the job to be printed, perhaps a fourth and a fifth iteration would be necessary. And I want to put some numbers behind this example. And for this reason, I have to make some assumptions. I want to assume a printing machine with a printing format of 70 times 100 centimeters. I furthermore want to assume that this printing machine is printing with 30,000 revolutions per hour and that the time between two print jobs is approximately 1 hour. These are just assumptions. Then I furthermore want to assume that the print shop is printing 6 days a week for 24 hours a day. And the sample calculation I'm doing is according to the example I've shown you before. I just want to assume that when working with standard, 100 sheets can be saved per job. I want to consider two cases, or let's say two substrates here. The first is offset paper with a grammage of 115 grams per square meter, and one folding boxboard with a grammage of 300 grams per square meter. And to come to the end, I need two additional estimates. One for the price of the paper, which I estimated with 75,000 Indian rupees per ton. And you will see later, I also need the CO2 emissions, which are produced for the production of the paper, which I estimated with 1,000 kilograms per ton. This is just an average number. And this is the example what you get with these assumptions. What you see on the left-hand side is the annual money savings per machine. On the x-axis, you see the money saving in million rupees, and on the y-axis you see this, and on the x-axis you see the print run length. And you see at one glance that the savings are the higher, the shorter the production run is. And you furthermore see that when printing with boxboard, more savings are achievable than when printing on papers. And from this diagram, I want to pick up 4 exemplary cases. The first case is a print shop which has 3 printing machines with an average print run length of 5,000. Then when printing on paper, this print shop could save 10 million rupees per year. When printing on boxboard, it would even be 25 million rupees per year. And if it's a big print shop with 8 printing machines, that when printing on papers, savings of 26 million rupees would be possible. And for boxboard, even 68 million rupees per year. The 2 other cases are for longer print runs, and for longer print runs, the savings are not so much, but still you have a lot of savings. When the print shop has 3 printing machines and it's printing on papers, then it can save 5 million rupees per year. If they print on boxboard, they can save approximately 14 million rupees per year, and if they would have 8 printing machines, The savings for paper would be 14 million rupees and for boxboard 37 million rupees. And I think this is quite a lot, only with saving 100 sheets per print shop. But besides money, you can also save CO2. And the CO2 is, especially in Europe, and I know that I come from Germany, is a very important issue. You see that the CO2 savings follow the same trend as the money. And I don't want to write on numbers, but I just want to go through the first two cases. With 3 machines and a print run of 5,000, when printing on paper, a print shop would save 130 tons CO2 per year. With boxboards, even 340 tons per year. Or a big print shop with 8 machines printing on paper saves 350 tons per year, and for boxboard 910 tons. This is really quite a lot. So at the end, I want to say a few words about certification of print shops according to this standardization concept. FOGRA offers 2 kinds of certifications. The first is the PSO certification. This is a worldwide certification program which was developed 20 years ago, and since then it is regularly updated, and of course the basis for the standardization concept is the PSO or ISO 12647. Different modules can be tested here. The first is the prepress module, which is an optional module, which comprises color management and contract proofing. Then we have the module print production, which consists of plate making and offset printing. And for offset printing, the test form, which you see here on the right-hand side, has to be printed, an OK print has to be produced, and then a short print run has to be printed. Always part of the game is the pre-flight check, where the print shop must demonstrate that it is able to detect failures in incoming PDF data. This test can be done on-site or also online with an auditor. And once the print shop gets a certificate, it's valid for 2 years, and after 1 year, a short intermediate test has to be done. The second certification is the PSO Basic, which is quite new. This has the same values and tolerances as the PSO certification, but a reduced scope of testing. And furthermore, no auditor is necessary for the tests. It's enough if the print shop just sends the printed sheets to FOGRA. In order to cope with the strong international demand for certifications, we also developed an international partner program. And the central figure of this partner program are our PSO partners. But what do those PSO partners do? They help print shops to get the PSO certificate. They lead the certification tests, and they are the intermediate between the print shops and FOGRA. And as soon as the jobs have been done, they send the prints and the documents for evaluation and certification to FOGRA. In order to become a PSO partner, one has to attend an intensive training at FOGRA and pass a written test. At the moment, we have 1 PSO partner in India, which is Mr. Kulakata Pradeep from Futures Goals. Like you see here, he already signed his first certification contracts at Drupa. 3 of them signed for PSO certification, 1 of them for PSO Basic. But what are the benefits of such a certification? Most benefits lie in advertising. Besides certification document, a certified print shop also gets a digital seal of approval, which can be used to demonstrate the quality and competence to the outside world. So this digital seal of approval can be incorporated into the web page. It can be incorporated in email signatures, in business cards, in letterhead. And furthermore, the company gets an entry in a web-based database. And this database in this database, the print shop can be found as certified company by quality-conscious customers. So they have a search mask which can be used by the customers in order to find a certified print shop in their vicinity. But not only an outward bound benefit can be achieved with a certification, also an internal benefit is possible, because the certification can give you a good feeling and the certainty that you are doing everything right in your daily business. So that's it from my side.